Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guest here today, well, first of all, everyone should recognize our guest. We're having her on basically almost a year before we last talked. And like we were saying before, my God, what a year it's been. But we have Jonquil Baugh back on the podcast coming to us from Kansas, where I don't even want to, talk about what life must be like in Kansas right now, being that, hey, they might be a cold winter, but at least they got the Chiefs to root for. But we won't get into too much into that. I don't want to jinx them. But most importantly, she's our current guest once again. Jonquil, thank you so much for coming back on.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on.
Where can I get started? Well, first of all, I got to get started with, I love torturing myself. What is the weather like in Kansas today?
You've picked a good day because there's a storm on its way.
So we've actually got basically similarly decent days. I think it's like 19 degrees here. So that's good about, now. But again, like I said the first time I had you on, I do not want to get into winter woes podcast because that's a whole tangent that's going to be 10 hours long. But why don't you give us an update? I mean, what you've been up to, obviously, with this crazy hectic year. It feels like it's been like 10 years since we last talked. But what have you been up to during the pandemic? And I know that you competed in a show like a month ago. What's been your whole journey since we last talked?
Well, I had planned to start my competitive season early in the year. Yeah, I normally compete around June, July. And I thought, you know what? Nope, I'm going to make sure that I get a couple of competitions in early around, April, May. And I was all set, I'm sure as many of the athletes were as well, to do the St. Louis Pro in I think it was in early May. That would have been. So I started prepping in about February. And then, of course, the COVID thing hit and I had to kind of just reset, get my head in gear for the next show. I thought, oh, sure, 30 days, a month, maybe 6 weeks, right? Didn't we all think that? So, I continued to prep and thought, okay, no problem. And then, of course, guess what? Another canceled show, another delayed show. And then you're thinking, okay, what's next? So it's basically been like a yo-yo, up and down, and finally got to compete in December, which I'm supremely grateful for,
So please don't tell me you're one of those where you stayed on prep the entire time, because we had some guests on and I was like, you poor thing. So did you have to do like an 11-month prep basically?
You know what? It felt like an 11-month prep, but I'm sure it wasn't. Because every time I got the news that something was delayed or canceled, I had like a little mini off season. I thought I had like a little meltdown and then followed by a little mini off season. And then you get yourself in gear, you kick yourself in the butt and you say, okay, come on, you can do this and start all over again. So yeah, no.
Well, and how did you deal with the gyms closing too? Because that was one thing where, I always say with bodybuilders, the gym is basically their heroin. So, you were going without your fix for a while. How did you deal with all that, being that you were also in prep?
Well, honestly, I am one of the lucky ones because I own a gym. So, I can't whine about anything, with regards to that. I was able to basically, there's literally, days where I could just hang out at my gym if I wanted to. And there were days that I did. So no excuses for me.
On top of all that, how'd you deal with it mentally? Because like I said, like you said, you broke down a couple of times, which I would have done basically every single day. But mentally, how were you still able to stay in the zone when it came to preps, knowing that, in the back of your mind, oh my God, this might get canceled and this all sort of might be for nothing?
What helped was that every extra week you were given, every time, show was delayed or canceled, you had to think, okay, how can I turn this to my advantage? How can I use this to improve upon whatever goals I may have? So after the first couple of times, you're thinking to yourself, okay, let me make good use of this, and let me see if I can take these extra few weeks that really are a gift in a sense, and continue to improve and to continue to make gains. That was helpful.
Yeah, it's nice to have that too, but were there any food shortages down in Kansas like we had up here in Minnesota where, there's a meat shortage? Do you have to deal with any of that?
Not really. Really just the toilet paper. That was the main
Which, if I want to just go and tell every person, it's like, there's leaves. It's like, good God, that's nature's, so yeah, that's a whole different thing where I kind of lost a little bit of faith in humanity and our willingness to survive an apocalypse if that actually did happen, where it's like, if everyone's just going for the toilet paper, we're screwed because, yeah, that's, don't even get me started on that,
well,
but
They're alternatives to toilet paper, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, let's face it. Toilet paper was invented what, like a couple hundred years ago, so they had their way around it, back then. Now, again, I'm not going to recommend the hygiene that they practiced back then, but just a little historical lesson for everyone. But how long was Kansas shut down? Because I mean, here in Minnesota, we were until I think it was like mid-July, and then we just shut down again in November, and now we're still shut down until like late January, I think it is.
We were lucky. We had the one shutdown, okay, that put us into that sort of 2-month timeline. And we opened up and things were good for maybe 3 weeks, I'd say, until things weren't so good anymore. But we've been very resistant to another lockdown, so they just haven't gone there. And as a result, the numbers kept climbing, climbing, and climbing, and they're just starting to come down now.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. The governor probably took one look at you and you're like, okay, we're not going to shut down those gyms. I don't want to get her mad or anything like that. So, hey, she can have it. Keep it open. Yeah, we're good for business. But no, I mean, it's something here that really a lot of people struggle with. Luckily, I had to move back in with my parents and they have, a nice setup downstairs. But I mean, yeah, it's just what a wild time we've been in. And how have you been dealing with this, business wise? Because I mean, even though you're open back up, I can guarantee that there's a or not a majority of people, but a decent amount of people that still have that fear about going into the gym. Have you started doing like online stuff like a lot of other people, or how have you been able to keep business, not like how you've been able to stay like out of the red completely?
Um, I'm not necessarily sure that we're out of the red completely, but the doors are open, so that's obviously a wonderful thing. But we were able to do some online classes, during the shutdown to bridge the gap for our members and clients. And those who are still fearful have continued to do those, and as a result, continue to support the club because we continue to give them that online resource. We're probably at about 50%, 50%, I'd say. And for every new person we get in, we may lose one. So it's sort of keeping us steady. If we do get some new people in, which we are starting to see that sort of New Year's resolutions start to take effect. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks.
Yeah, for states that definitely have their gyms open, it's going to be interesting to see, especially starting at least even tomorrow. What that's going to look like for gym enrollment. But now here's the part where we plug the gym. So what's the name of the gym and where's it at? So anyone that's listening here, if they need a gym to go to in the Kansas area, can go to it.
So JQ's BFit 2, okay? JQS BFIT and the number 2. And we're in Overland Park, Kansas. And we're sort of a boutique club. We have a 24-hour studio gym, and then we have small group training as well. So a little bit of everything.
Well, those 24 hours, yeah, those are ideal because I'd be the one that I'd be going in there at like 1 or 2 in the morning. And, that's the perfect hour for me because no one's there. No one's doing anything. So, yeah.
Perfect. I mean, a lot of the 24-hour members love that because it's like their own personal gym. They can come in whenever they want to. They know that it's not going to be crowded. And that's kind of how we are surviving, is that we're sort of trying to market that to say, look, this is kind of like your own gym. And you can choose the times that are the least busy so you can feel safe. The mask situation, we were probably one of the few gyms right at the beginning to implement the mask protocol. So we've been wearing masks since day one. I know that doesn't suit everybody, but I think it's also helped make our members feel safe.
Yeah, the only reason that I would have any problem with that is that I don't drink a gallon of water when I work out. I drink a whole lake. So, basically they would have to like put a little hole through my mouth and then have like a tube. They would literally have to have like a tube inserted in it at all times so I could just have like a gallon jug just attached to me wherever I go then so I could just continuously do it. But yeah, that's the only thing with me where literally one of my guests sent me like a gallon jug and I literally had a video of me like drinking it in a span of like half an hour where then I was like, yeah, I'm going to need more than that. But no, yeah. So that's the only thing with me. But yeah, that's awesome that at least you have the mask thing. Cause yeah, I mean, let's be honest. It is awkward. I mean, it's not ideal when obviously if you're on doing cardio or anything like that. But one thing that I rewatched our podcast before we got started today, I watched it last night. And one thing that you were talking about is that you want to put on more size. And obviously we've seen that. So how has this last prep really differentiated the other preps when it comes to putting on even more size, especially during a pandemic where I got to be honest, most of the guests that I have on usually have lost a little bit of size as opposed to putting on size.
So interesting. During the pandemic, I lost my structure a little bit, obviously. And I think I could say safely that most of us are pretty um, structured and organized individuals when it comes to our prep. I'm not saying the rest of our lives. So all our energy is sort of making sure that we control every part of our day, and that kind of went out the window for me. So what happened is that um, my fasting that I normally am really on point with, and my macro tracking and the caloric intake, it all kind of just was skewed. So I didn't get to fast as much. I ate a little bit more, and during those little mini off seasons, that really allowed me to grow. Because I'm constantly in prep, fasting, doing cardio, restricting calories, and then you'd have these weeks once the show is canceled where you're like, okay, crap, all right, okay, cut the fasting out, cardio drops down, add a few more calories in there, and all of a sudden you've incurred a little bit more growth than you would normally. So that's kind of how it worked for me.
Have you thought about doing that again this coming year then? As opposed, have you maybe think that you stumbled on a little bit of a secret that you might not have ever got?
Yeah, I love fasting. I think it's useful and I think it has all sorts of benefits, but I kind of got possibly a little carried away with it. So, and when you have the somewhat obsessive compulsive personality, that's what we do. We find something that we really like and we're like, oh, this is awesome. And we tend to do it maybe a little bit too much. So I think cutting back on the fasting is probably something I'll continue to make sure I do.
Yeah, that was me during the pandemic where I'd work out and then I'd also do like 100 minutes of walking on the treadmill, like 5 times a week. And I was like, yeah, you might want to tone that down a little bit because it's like that food bill that you get if you ever do that. Everyone, don't do that because your food bill is going to be the most expensive thing out there, and you're going to be like, okay, this is ridiculous, and then you're almost going to burn the house down because you're going to overcook some chicken, which almost happened. And I don't want to get into all that because it'll become this whole big thing with my family and stuff. But no, yeah. So it's been
Already a big thing with your family.
Oh yeah. Where they're just like, yeah, they literally like at night, they'd smell the chicken that I was, cooking every single night. So yeah, it's been a lot of adjusting too. But I mean, especially when it comes to just the training aspect as well. I mean, have you changed up the way that you train other than just the taking breaks, more breaks, and calories? Is there anything with the actual like weight training that differed?
Um, I probably because I was, you know, uh, had a little bit more energy and I was able to put forth a little more oomph into my workouts. I probably lifted a little heavier for longer. And so, if I can figure out how to uh, implement that and keep my training a little heavier for longer before I start to find myself in the position where you just can't lift as heavy because you're just calorically deprived and you're just fatigued all the time. I think that would work really well. So rather than lift heavy maybe for the first 4 weeks and then you start to taper off for the last 2 months of prep, maybe I try and lift heavy for 2 months and then taper off during the last month or something like that.
It really seems like you've got onto something. So I hope that we're not spilling the beans for all these other competitors to get better. But hey, that's great that you've.
Anything to help the cause.
That's true. That's true. Hey, that's awesome. And what do you think is one body part that you've improved on the most since we last talked almost a year ago?
I would say shoulders and back was where I was really trying to add a little bit more size, just to kind of create that upside down triangle that we're all striving for. So and I think my legs carried a little bit more than usual too. So yeah.
Well, she said shoulders, and I had a concern that we might not be able to fit her in the screen when she first popped up on it. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe she went a little too hard there, But no, So I had Andrea Shaw on the Miss Olympia, she was on like 3 months ago, and that was the one time where I was like, okay, I might need to zoom out and get a bigger camera. But yeah, so she's coming on again next week to talk about her victory. But oh my God, are you talking about just you're like. Yeah, I mean, I need to install a new camera on my on my phone, but yeah, that's amazing that you're able to see that, and that's just so great. And yeah, it's funny how you were able to gain as much as you did during this year when everyone else was struggling. I mean, we had some guests on where they're like, yeah, I lost like 10 pounds of muscle, and it's just yeah, but it really does show that the pandemic really affects people in different ways. But how did you affect all this stuff too with we were just talking about like the mental side when it comes to competing, but just the whole mental side of, when it first happened, some people thought it was like the apocalypse and like everything was going to come to an end. How did you deal with all that? Because, me for one, I was like, am I even going to do this podcast anymore? Like, what's the point? Like if everything's going to go down south as a lot of people thought it was, but how were you how were you dealing with all that?
I am a natural introvert. So, it kind of suits my personality. So that part of it is easier for me than others. I'm an only child. I moved around the world every few years when I was younger. Um, I had to find a way to amuse myself. And so I enjoy my own company. I don't mind being alone. I get social anxiety, so withdrawing from society, from the social aspect is not a problem for me. I chose a job where I had to be in front of people for this reason, because I needed to get out of my comfort zone and push myself and make sure that I didn't kind of withdraw into myself, which, we're all tempted to do if we're introverts. So, the COVID experience sort of gave me a reason to kind of, I don't know, do what I naturally gravitate towards, if that makes any sense.
And you're talking to a guy who's almost as big of an extrovert as you can find. So, for me, it was just like, what the hell is going on? But let's be honest, I can be an introvert too as well. Like, I can enjoy, like, I enjoyed being alone and, doing all that stuff. But it got to a point where I was like, I haven't seen any friends in like 2 months. So I'm like, this is just what's going on now. So that's why the podcast really, really, I got way more into it, because I was like, at least I can talk to someone some way instead of, I don't want to be that crazy guy that's, wandering around my backyard just talking in my head. And then people are like, what's Ryan doing? He's like, oh, he's got to get his words out of the day and he's got to get his talking out. But yeah, it's just,
He's talking to himself now.
Yeah, and it almost got to that point a couple of times where I was like, oh my god, this is so bad. But I mean, yeah, that's great that, and a lot of bodybuilders I actually have found that actually some of them are really big introverts. But then I was like, oh, you kind of picked a weird sport to get into then if you're really an introvert going on stage and stuff. But like you said, they do it to help with that and help them be a little bit more of an extrovert. But yeah, just with all that stuff that the sport entails, it's really I think helped out a lot of people in that way. But also when it comes to, I mean, we talked about posing last time, but have you changed up your routine at all over the last year? Because that's one thing that I think people don't understand, is that a lot of bodybuilders change it up over the years.
Yes. Well, I kind of gave myself this deal where I said, that I would, continue to use the same choreography or the routine, until I kind of moved up into a better placing, or I give myself these little, goals to achieve before before I get, deserve to get a new suit. I have to, at least accomplish this. Before I change my routine, I have to accomplish this, and so, uh, the new suit, I thought I was going to basically get a new suit when I won a pro show. I realized how that was somewhat unrealistic of me. So now I'm thinking that maybe a new suit is just going to happen because it's going to be a while before I win my pro show. But notice I did say when and not if, so I'm being very positive. Okay, very positive. Now the choreography, I really I enjoy this particular song and the particular choreography that I have for this song. So I want sort of to make sure that I make the most of it and get the most out of it. And I really haven't been able to do the 60-second piece at the end, because I wasn't able to, I didn't break into the top 10 until now. So I've only ever done that routine twice. So I feel like there's a little bit more to go with that routine, only having done it twice.
Well, I gotta ask, looking the way that you look, I'm thinking like, how has she not won a pro show? So what are the judges telling you is preventing you from? What do they say that you need to work on?
A lot of it comes down to who you're up against at the show. And so if a lot of the girls come in, I say a lot of the girls, but if like say the top 5 or the top 10 come in super conditioned and super dry, you could have beautiful symmetry, you could have good muscle mass, good detail. But if you're just not as dry as they are, then that's just going to put you on the sideline. I felt like I was a little, for my size, for my height, I should say, being 5'9", I felt like I needed to carry a little bit more mass. So I was able to do that this time, which the judges seemed to like. Um, but I was still not quite as dry as those in the top 5. So again, it's trying to find that balance and trying to keep the size and yet be extreme with your conditioning.
I thought she was going to say that she needed to put on even more, and I was like, geez, what's that going to look like in a year from now? Good God. But no, that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand too, like we talked about before. I mean, you could be the most in shape person on the planet, and with posing and just, it really depends on what the other people look like, because you could be, like me plus 100 pounds of muscle, and if the other guys are a little bit more leaner and stuff, and I don't get the shreds as much, it really does affect your placing, and that really kind of stinks at times. But unfortunately, it really is just a part of the sport. But
And in the next show, the results could be different. If the girls come in a little fuller, a little softer, a little less vascular, and then you come in conditioned and dry and shredded, and then you're the odd one out, and you don't place because of that. So it's a crapshoot sometimes.
absolutely. And what was your show day experience like, especially during this pandemic? Because I mean, it must be kind of different not to have everyone out cheering really as much, or you don't hear as much cheering as you normally would. Just being out there kind of alone. What was that? Was it sort of like a surreal moment for you when you went on stage?
No, not really, because honestly, uh, I don't really pay much attention to that at all when I'm on stage. Everything outside of what's going on in your head is really not important. I also can't see a thing, so visually, it doesn't impact me at all. And you're really just focused on the judges in front of you and where you're at on stage and what you're doing. So no, there was no change with regards to that at all for me. Um, I thought the show ran exceptionally smoothly. Um, I actually prefer how it was run due to the COVID protocols, personally.
So what made them different when it came to protocols? Was it just they didn't have you guys as bunched together as you normally would be, or?
We didn't have to hang around quite as long. We got moving a lot faster. Um, the whole check-in was fast. It was a roll-in check-in. So we would just go in, get checked in, get our little bag, get our little photo taken, and walk out. So literally it was 10 minutes. Whereas normally you have the meeting where we're all sitting there together, and yes, it's wonderful to have the speeches, and it's wonderful to get introduced, and it's wonderful, but it's an hour to an hour and a half of your time when you would possibly prefer to just be hanging out with your feet up, just resting, chilling. You know, what else was different? The downloading the music beforehand, so you didn't have to worry about, oh, have I forgotten my CD? Do I have my music with me? That was awesome. And then they had an app where you could just kind of where they'd message you to let you know when your division was up. So you could stay in your hotel room until you needed to come down, which was, even better.
Wait a minute, they still made you guys use CDs? Did they think it was like 1996 or something?
CDs up to this point.
Wow.
Yes. Is that crazy?
I didn't even know, like, I found my old, like, childhood stuff, and I had, like, some CDs in there. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to use these again, because what do you even play CDs on anymore? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey.
I think they've made some upgrades that they'll hopefully keep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we talked about it last time, how one of the myths that people don't believe, or that people believe, is that, that look that you present on stage is a sustainable look, but it isn't. How is this year? I mean, I know because you competed recently, but has this year's off season been any different than the other ones, just because of COVID, or just because it happened during closer to the holidays than normal? Is this off season been different for you so far than a normal one?
Yes, just because I've never competed this late into the season, and my off season only starts in September. So it's kind of a weird deal where I'm just starting my off season right when the holidays are happening. And then what it also means that I've lost 2 months of my off season already. If I plan to start prepping in February, it doesn't give me long at all. So you got a very short off season, and you have an off season that starts with pretty much holidays. So reverse prepping has been very challenging, I have to say.
Hey, at least most of the time you don't have to get together with family really, and have to worry about, oh, why aren't you eating? Why aren't you doing this? You're done with your
Or do you
competitions.
want
Do that.
second?
So
Do you
you know.
want third? Yeah.
Yes, yes. So at least there's that. So have they said that they're going to maintain like a normal schedule like it would have been last year, so that people don't have that longer off season?
So as far as I know right now, it seems like the St. Louis Pro is still when it would normally be. So we're like, okay, all right, I guess we start prepping in February.
Jeez, yeah. Wow.
So yeah,
Well, you better be going on like 50,000 calories a day then if you want to get a good prep in then.
it's like can't waste any time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So that's yeah, I find that fascinating that they're doing that. Where I think that maybe they should just do like half the time that it would have been. So then the next year it can go back to the normal time. Then where people have maybe like an extra month or so of off season at least to get back into it. But yeah, that's just I mean just the
because if you think
crazy.
about the Olympians, they were 2 weeks after the Phoenix, so they have 2 weeks less than I did. So yeah.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, yeah, when this is just an asterisk kind of a year where it's just like what has been going on, and how is this gonna but luckily as we're speaking right now, because for everyone this will be out in like 2 to 3 weeks, we're speaking on New Year's Eve, so that we're in the last day of this crappy year, so hopefully once it turns midnight, things get a little bit better. But we heard she might have a snowstorm, so who knows, next year could be even worse, but I'm not gonna jinx it. I'm just saying that everyone don't think that just because it's the next day it's gonna get much better. I know this is a very down podcast we're getting right now, everyone. We prepare for the worst, but no, yeah, it's just been so off kilter. But what has your cardio been like? Because like I told you, like my cardio, I took it way too much to an extreme. But what has your cardio been like during this last prep?
Um. So I found because I didn't have a true off season earlier, I had these little mini off seasons, that my cardio stayed a little higher overall, um, which allowed me not to have to uh, bring my cardio up quite as high this time around in prep because it was a little higher going into prep, if that makes sense. Now every athlete, of course, you talk to them, their off season cardio starts at a different level than my off-season cardio, so that my prep cardio will end up being maybe twice as much as someone else's depending on where they were with their off-season cardio. So I really found that every athlete has very different protocols when it comes to cardio. I need, unfortunately, genetically, whatever it is, I need higher amounts of cardio to achieve the body fat levels that are now being required for the physique division. I can't get away with just doing, 45 minutes a day. That's not going to cut it. So regardless, I end up doing a lot of cardio, but I did find that having a higher cardio all year round just meant that I didn't have to push it quite as high at the end.
Well, and you brought up a fascinating point because yeah, it seems like the body fat percentage and stuff is going down in physique, and it's just you got to be tighter and tighter. And do you see it continuing to go like that, or do you think that maybe eventually it's going to reach a point where they're like, okay, this is like way too extreme now, where we got to dial it down? Where do you think it's going to be at in the future?
I think it's going to get as extreme as it possibly can before it turns around. It's just, the same thing will happen. If we look at women's bodybuilding, it had to get very extreme, more extreme than it already is, before things turned around. Unfortunately for them, they were taken off the schedule, which was completely unfair. But they were brought back on the schedule with some new sort of criteria. The physique division will go that same way. It's just going to go, go, go until it can't anymore. And then they'll have to figure out what to do about it. Either create another division in between physique and bodybuilding. I don't know. Weight class.
Or who knows, the figure competitor or the physique competitors now will just go to figure, because figure will basically become the new physique, basically. So
That's what I'm saying. So
yeah.
you've got figure going to physique, and so physique goes where exactly? Do we become lightweight? Do we, well, I don't know. Do we become classic physique, just like the guys? So
Yeah. who know? I mean, yeah, that's one thing that's a trend that I've been noticing that's really, seemed to be doing it. I thought that maybe the pandemic would maybe bring a little bit less of a, extreme packages because people would have maybe more limited options, but nope, it got even better. It got even worse now. So who knows? Who knows? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, who knows with that? But now, I mean, obviously with, sleep being the most important thing, and we talked about this more briefly on the first time, but I think sleep is a little bit weirder now because people have so much more free time where it's, sleep schedules have been tending to get a little bit more extreme too, because like even with mine, I'm staying up even late. Like I told you, I got up at like noon today basically because I was up all night editing. But has your sleep schedule changed at all during this pandemic? Because I mean, obviously in the beginning when you didn't really have a gym to run where you could just hang out in the gym, I mean, you didn't have to be there all night. But what was that adjustment like sleep wise, especially being on that almost ever constant prep, even though it really wasn't?
Oh, I'm a night owl. So the only thing that actually forces me to bed is work in the morning. So when I did not have work in the morning, um, I could basically stay up until 4 or 5 in the morning. Yeah, and it didn't matter. It was fine because I could take naps during the day. I could sleep in if I wanted to. I mean, it was of no consequence. So then, of course, the struggle to get back into a healthy rhythm again. That's been interesting. Telling myself that no, regardless of what I have in the morning, this is the time you need to go to bed, and then this is the time you need to get up, regardless of what schedule you have. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, it's just, yeah, that whole sleep thing is a whole conundrum. And I think as we get back to somewhat of a sense of normalcy, hopefully people's sleep will get right back on track. But along with that time thing, like I bet you hear all the time, a lot of people, oh, I want to get in shape, but I just don't have the time. I just don't. If you make that excuse now, I want to know what's going on in your life because that's just ridiculous. But what advice you have for people, especially during this pandemic, to if they want to get started, especially because I can guarantee, tomorrow you'll probably have at least a couple of people who are just first time gym people like, oh my God, I want to get in shape. But what advice would you have specifically during this time? Because I feel like in this pandemic, it might be a little bit different to get started on your fitness journey.
hmm I really do feel like if you've been doing something at home for the last, 6 to 9 months, just like anything, your body is going to adapt and adjust to it. And then obviously, you'll get diminishing returns. So you do want to find something different and something that's going to continue to challenge yourself. So if you can find a health club that you're comfortable with, whether it's a boutique club, whether it's a 24-hour, whatever type of gym, uh, I would definitely suggest adding some gym time back into your routine because without knowing it, more than likely your intensity has dropped because that's what happens when you're at home by yourself zooming. There's no one to be accountable to. No one knows how hard you're working. Your perceived exertion is exactly that, perceived exertion. So sometimes it's good to get back into the gym with other people working out around you. And when you realize, oh my gosh, I haven't quite been working out quite as hard as I thought I was, you know, maybe that's why changes aren't happening. And then think about the nutritional side of things and the I hate to say diet because I don't like to use that word, but you know what I mean when we look at just dietary changes and start looking at how you can become more structured with that and figuring out where you are with foods that you would not normally have been eating all this time, but all of a sudden they're your staples. How to migrate away from that a little bit and bring back those healthier foods that you've forgotten about. So start there.
Yeah, I've seen way too many people go full on Rambo, and I bet you've seen that as well, where they think that, I'm going to go in the gym and work out 3 hours a day for like a week, and then they last a week, and then they're just like, oh my God, my body's broken, so yeah, I quit now. So take your time too. Yeah, don't be ashamed if you can only go for like half an hour or so at first. Hey, that's fine. Yeah.
Yes, if you haven't been doing a thing, if you've been like a couch potato, the best thing to do is actually just to get up and walk. Get up and move. Start something at home, even. And a little something more often is better than a lot of something less frequently. Rather than think about doing, 3-hour binge workout, think about doing, okay, let me do 30 minutes every day.
Absolutely. And I mean, one thing, as soon as you mentioned that your shoulders are the thing that improved the most, that's the one body part that women on this podcast say is probably the hardest thing for them to grow. If I were to do a poll, that's like 70 to 80%. So what did you do for shoulders? Because I bet I have people listening when this comes out right now are going to be like, if he doesn't ask her what she did for her shoulders, I'm going to find out where he lives and claw him to death because, I want to know how to do that.
So there's a balance with trying to create strength and trying to grow your shoulders. And it's a tough one. And so you can have really strong shoulders, but that may not mean that they are shaped and are growing the way that you need them to grow for the stage. So for me, it was the case was, okay, I have strong shoulders, but I was not necessarily working them frequently enough. So I added a couple of extra sessions in a week to hit those slower growing areas, and focusing in on those, rather than just doing a blowout. We'll just talk about it, a blowout session, killing my shoulders, right? And then they're dead for the entire week. So I figured, okay, let me divide that workout up a little bit, split it up during the week, and try to focus in on those areas that are just a little bit more slow growing. So you focus in on the side delts a little bit more, so you increase your volume for that. If you find that your rear delts are not coming up as you need to, you add some volume or change it up for your rear delts. But if you try and just do one workout and try and do it all at one time, it's awesome, but your shoulders pretty much are done for the rest of the week. And so it's another 6 days before you get to them again. So I basically just divide it up a little bit and try to hit them 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah, and there's so many times that I hear people, they're like, oh, you only got to train them once a week. And it's like, well, if you look at some of the people that have the really nice body parts, they do it a little bit more than once a week. But have you done mind to muscle connection at all with shoulders or stuff? Because that's one thing that we hear of all the time, too.
Well, here's the thing. There's lifting heavy, okay, for just systemic growth. And then there's trying to connect with the muscle and really sort of feeling the muscle contract, slowing the movement down, doing things like static holds and pauses and cadence work, and really finding that connection. And the weight that you have to use is not a heavy weight at all. It really isn't. So it is definitely another way to stress that muscle to the point where it actually grows. Weight is just one fraction of basically it's a small part of how you can achieve growth with any body part. But we get so caught up on lifting heavy and heavier, and then we lose, sense of all the other ways that you can activate and you can create growth in those body parts. So
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I did my first mind to muscle workout with legs in September, and I should have never done it because the next morning I woke up and I took 3 steps out of my bed, and then I almost fell over. But hey, because that's my number one struggling body part. But I asked a question about a body part that the girls love, but now I got to ask one for the guys because your arms, holy crap! I mean, they're veined out and everything, and I mean, every guy looks at that and they're like jealous. So, what does an arm day look like for you? Because I mean, right now even I'm like, okay, what does she do? Because I'm going to try that immediately tomorrow.
Well, some of this is genetics, right?
Of course, I know some of it is, but I was gonna say, let's be honest. Genetics plays a certain part, but I mean, you could be you without ever having done a curl in your entire life, and it won't look like the way that you look right now. So genetics pushes you a certain way. So I'm just gonna say that out to everyone too. Yeah, genetics plays a very, very big part, but you still have to do the work. But yeah,
we still have to work. It's just that sometimes what will happen is someone will replicate exactly what you do and wonder why they don't see the results. Well, that could be simply because that's just not the way your body's made, so I'm just kind of qualifying it out.
Absolutely, yes. I have to say that too, which is why I say whenever, like, what's one body part that you really took off and what's one body part that you like behind. That's why I asked that question on everyone's first podcast, just so that everyone realizes that, like, hey, if I do exactly what they do, you're not going to look like them.
That's right. So, so for me, because my arms are one of my easier body parts, I only hit them once a week. But remember, when you're working back and you're working, shoulders and you're working chest, arms are involved. So they're never just hit once a week. But I don't need to necessarily do a solo arm workout more than once a week. And I try basically, and I'll do couple of heavy exercises where I keep my reps between 5 and 8. And then after that, I'll superset, and I'll do higher rep ranges, and then probably finish up with maybe a set of hundreds where you basically rep out until you get to 100 to finish off. So that's a very cool way to finish off an arm workout.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting itself. But now here you embarrass us, John. Can you give us a front double buy, because this is just absolutely ridiculous, everyone. Good God. Look at here, just hold that for a second, because everyone just look at that. That's just absolutely ridiculous. We all got to go and hit the gym now, because that is just insane. She's definitely put it on. I mean, good God, everyone. Oh my God, yeah. Well, just that alone is going to inspire about half the viewers to start working out. Just looking at that. But yeah, again, that's just so great. But if we were to talk to you again a year from today, because again, last time we talked, if I asked you the same question, if you would have predicted a global pandemic and everything else that's gone down, I would have called you a liar and bet my entire life savings against it. Goes to show you how much we really do know. But in an ideal world, if we were to talk a year from now today, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding? Where would you like to be at in your personal life, or just overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved?
Um, if we were to look in the future, where would I like to be? So let's start with work wise. Obviously, you know that the smaller clubs were hit hard. So, my goal is to sort of get back to get the gym back to its former glory, to get everybody back, get the family back together again, basically. So I'm hoping by, summertime of next year, people will have sort of come out of their cocoons and, rejoined the club. And I think also with the club, trying to do things a little differently, probably, investigating that whole online aspect, because you realize how vulnerable you are as a small uh, club, and the online thing saved us. So it's one of those things where I feel like that's something that I need to pursue and probably sort of incorporate into the club somehow. So that's that. And then for me, bodybuilding wise, I would really love to be able to compete earlier on in the season, of course. So it would be great if I could do the St. Louis Pro. I don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe more realistic that I do the Omaha, which is in June, gives me an extra month. But I'd like to do at least 2 to 3 shows next year. I would love to break the top 5. I don't even know if that's feasible. I'm like, oof, big question mark. But I would be awesome to be able to be in the top 5 in one of my shows, which would just be great. Yeah.
Well, 5'9" and to be as built as she is, I don't know why I don't know. I don't even know why that's a question, because being 5'9" in female bodybuilding, you're basically like a giant compared to everyone else. Where that's another thing too, where it's like, you're kind of, I've had a 6'2" person on. They're basically like a freaking, they're like a monster basically. Then when they walk on, so yeah, it's who
We feel like we're these Amazon women, and we're not really. But because with the physique division, especially, they are little, and I mean that in the nicest way.
Oh,
They're not,
absolutely, yeah, they're not, yeah.
But they're, we're talking 5'2" to 5'5", maybe. That's the range. So 5'9", with the Phoenix Pro, it was nice to have some of there were actually 3 or 4 other taller girls there with me. And we were sort of joking about that. Say it's nice to have some tall girls in the show this time around.
Oh,
So
100%, yeah, and that's just great too, because yeah, I love having the taller people on, because I'm 6'3" myself, so having people that understand what tall people go through, as opposed to they're like, oh my God, they put on muscle so easy. It's like, yeah, because they're 5 feet tall. They don't have as much to work with. They don't have the long leg bones and the long, yeah.
somewhere, so it goes this way.
Yeah, I could literally walk up to him and bounce him like a basketball, basically. So yeah, it's yeah, that's another, yeah, that's a whole another podcast in and of itself, where people just don't understand that, but they really need to. But yeah, that's just something. And again, yeah, it was just so great having you on, and giving us an update on what you've been up to. And I mean, honestly, we look forward to seeing you on again a year from now, and I hope you've won your first pro show by then. I think you will, but hey, then again, it all depends on other things that you can't control. But yeah, it's great that you've really been
and you have to look at, okay, what can I control, what can I do to make sure that I go in the best condition I can, and if that's not good enough, then so be it. and you just gotta have to let it go and try again next time. And until if as long as the passion is there, unless you until you feel like it's not worth it to you anymore, then you've got no choice but to just keep fighting, keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Always, of course, my husband Gary, my workout partners, they know who they are, and my club members and my clients, and of course my family, and the pups, Belle and
Yep.
Flux.
Yep. Our little dog too. I mean, she's enjoying. So, how have your dogs enjoyed the pandemic? Being that you are going to be probably spending more time with them.
They loved it.
Yeah, I was
They
gonna
had
say
the best. They had the best time.
the
I
dogs are
mean,
probably the one species that has been thriving through all this because they get more playtime and stuff, and our dog has been enjoying that as well. And again, Jonquil, we cannot thank you enough for coming back on and doing all that. And honestly, like I said before, we wish you nothing but the best. It's a great pleasure having you on. And everyone, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot. I'll leave a link to all of her stuff down below. And if you're in the Kansas area and you need a place to work out, go and work out at her place. I mean, just even taking one look at her, if you walk into the gym, you're gonna get inspired to work out more. Okay, that would be my inspiration. Are you kidding me? Like I'd be in there like 10 hours a day. But again, thank you so much. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, guys.